Okay, I think we're ready. All right. So I'm really excited that you guys are here, and I'll tell you why. So I've been in wellness-based family chiropractic practice I graduated December of 2000, so a lot of years. And when I look over the course of my career, when I say wellness-based, what I mean is like, we're not a pain-based office. What we're about is like helping people realize what's possible in terms of their own health. What I really want to see is like people living a great life. And if I look over the course of the history of the people that I've come into contact with, the ones that I've seen that have really transformed, where like I'm not even in contact with them anymore. Like maybe we're friends on Facebook or something, but they moved away. But I could really tell that their lives are different because they came to classes like this one. By far, like across the board. So you guys, I know you're going to be different as a result of spending, the few hours that we're going to do today. The other thing I know about you is that the fact that you're willing to spend your Saturday doing this, you're the kind of person where good things are going to happen to you. So I want to deliver for you today. This is going to be a little bit of a choose your own adventure. Do you remember those books, choose your own adventure books? And that there's a few things that I want to talk about, and there's a few things that I want you to really own to the point where you could actually teach it to somebody else. But we can go down all different kinds of paths. There's all different things that we could do. Is there anything, and just to get your input, is there anything that you came here really hoping that you would get in particular? You told me you wanted to weed through all the nutrition stuff, right?
Right.
We're going to do that.
Learn how to make it applicable to your life.
Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to do like a day in your life. And where we start in morning, go all the way to the evening and plug it all in. Anything else? Anything in particular?
Stress.
Stress, we're going to talk about that. Like how to, what in particular about it?
How it affects me, pain,
Okay.
physical.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, that's built in already. We're going to do that. And how to overcome it. All right.
Detox.
We're going to do detox.
And said best bang for your buck kind of thing.
Best bang for your buck as far as what?
Food, nutrition,
Okay.
like all over health.
Okay.
It can be expensive sometimes.
It can, yeah.
Right.
All right. Yeah, we'll get into that. All right. Well, that being said, let's get it. Let's do it. So when we talk about nutrition as it relates to health and disease, I think of it as functional nutrition. So if we want to kind of frame everything from the standpoint of understanding that what health really is a state where your body can actually work right and heal itself at 100%. Like that's the definition of health. And so the way a lot of people act and think about health is that, well, if I feel okay, then I'm healthy. But the reality is you could feel okay and be dying of heart disease, or you could feel fine and be developing cancer. And so we don't want to just use how we're feeling. And when it comes to nutrition, we want to look at like, well, how does what we eat relate to and play into how our body functions and how our body heals? There's 5 factors that we're going to look at that I think are key. Like if we say health equals function, that relate to how your body's functioning. So the first one is nutrition. We're going to talk about that. The second one is that all function comes from your nervous system. The third one is that fitness, the type of exercise that you do. So we all know that we probably should exercise, right? But the type of exercise that you do might not be getting the kind of results that you're looking for. The type of exercise that you do might actually be raising your stress hormones instead of lowering them. So we might get into that. We want to minimize the toxic load on our body. So toxins literally interfere with our body's ability to function. So we want to know what are the main areas that we might be getting exposed to it, and how do we minimize it? And then the last thing, I call this mind-body lifestyle design. So what this has to do with really is that, like when I think of living a great life, so if I want all of you to live a great life, I don't want you to be like healthy but miserable. You know what I mean? Like your body's working good, but you're just like depressed all the time. Or your body's working good, but you're stressed out. Or you don't have time to do the things that you want. So when I think of mind-body lifestyle design, I also like to think of like, how do we hack our brain? How do we get our brain to serve us the way that we want to? How can we be healthy and happy? How can we like design our lifestyle so that we're getting good nutrition, but we're not stressed out about how much time it takes or how much it costs or any of those things? Okay, so I want to get into that actually more than I ever have before. So I hope you want to hear that. when we say, is your culture working? I actually read, I meant to bring it, but I forgot it. But it was a quote from Vladimir Putin. I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy, but he, what's the synopsis? Is he a good guy or a bad guy?
Yes.
He's good, yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
But anyways, basically what he said was, he was like, we could keep getting better about understanding our body and becoming healthier and raising up as a culture, or we could do what the Western world is doing, and we could poison ourselves with food and medications and more vaccinations. You know, he was basically saying like we could move in a good direction as a culture, or we could do what the United States is doing essentially. And so, like, I identified with that because if you look around at the culture around us, that's probably not what you want, right? So we are more depressed, we have more illness, you know, sanitation and hygiene and clean water has done away with a lot of infectious disease, but we have more chronic disease than we ever have before. We've created new diseases that didn't used to exist, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So what we want to do is, essentially what we want to do today is we want to create our own culture. You want to create your own culture, particularly for your family. The other thing is when we talk about you know, being healthy, being expensive, so like spending too much on food. What it will never compete with is how much it costs being sick. So that's another thing that you want to kind of keep in mind. Despite the most healthcare spending, Americans are in worse health, die earlier, and suffer from more diseases than any other wealthy nations. Hurricane Sandy cost $60 billion to clean out. We spend that every single week on healthcare. Bankruptcy because of medical bills is now 69%. 62% of the people have insurance. So the whole idea that we're going to reform healthcare by having everybody have insurance, that doesn't look like it'll work out that well either. So what we want to do is really like understand that healthcare isn't really healthcare, it's sick care. It's not designed to make you healthy. So if you're going to be healthy, who's responsible for that?
We are.
Exactly, okay? So step number one is just an understanding that we have to take responsibility for our own health. And it's not that healthcare doesn't have good things in it, or it can do good things, but it's better if we don't have to utilize it like everybody else does. All right, so when we look at, there's a few basic things, and this is where you want to take notes. So everybody should have a piece of pen and a paper. There's a few key concepts about how your diet relates to how your body's functioning that you want to know. Our mantra for nutrition and toxicity is that we want to decrease inflammation and we want to increase hormone sensitivity. So everybody say that with me. Decrease inflammation, increase hormone sensitivity. You want to own that. So like when you look at the way that you eat, you want to understand, how can I eat in such a way that I decrease inflammation and I increase hormone sensitivity. The opposite of that would be, you want to understand when you kind of go off your plan, how what you're doing is actually creating inflammation or causing hormone resistance, which is the opposite of hormone sensitivity. So insulin resistance is the inability of your body to hear insulin. How it affects weight loss resistance. This is just one example, but chronically, if your insulin levels are high, it blocks your body's ability to burn fat. So insulin is a fat storage hormone. So when you raise insulin, you turn off the signal to burn fat, and you turn on the signal to store it. Chronically elevated insulin lowers serotonin. What's serotonin for? Makes you happy, exactly. So an antidepressant is a SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It blocks your body's ability to reabsorb serotonin, to raise your serotonin levels. Well, when you have high elevated insulin will decrease your serotonin levels. Most of your serotonin is not produced in your brain, it's actually produced in your gut. That's a side note that's important to know. So the health of your GI tract is one of the most important things for the health of your brain. Most of your immune system is in your gut too, so if your immune system is going to be strong, your gut's got to be in good shape. So many things are related to gut health, and we're going to talk specifically about that too. Chronically elevated insulin causes internal fat storage around the abdomen. Chronically elevated insulin causes inflammation. So a couple like tie-ins here. One of the biggest risk factors for if you're going to have a heart attack is if your belly is bigger than your butt. Okay? You want your belly to be smaller than your butt. If your belly's bigger than your butt, that means your body's in an inflamed state. And elevated insulin causes what? Inflammation. And what causes heart disease? Also inflammation. All right? If I asked you the cause of any disease, if you said inflammation, you'd probably be right. It's like one of the most common factors for any kind of disease process or anything that you don't want happening in your body is elevated inflammation. And the way most people eat chronically elevates inflammation primarily by raising the insulin level. So, do we want insulin to be high or low?
Low.
Low, okay? And why do we want it to be low? Because high insulin causes inflammation, it causes fat storage, it lowers serotonin. Causes of insulin resistance. So sugar and everything that turns to sugar is what causes insulin resistance. Now, kind of the way that it works is if you eat something that turns to sugar, the faster it hits your bloodstream, the higher the insulin is going to go. Okay, it's got to respond more the faster it goes in. So the more refined something is, the faster it turns to sugar. Okay, so if you put a piece of white bread in your mouth, within seconds, your saliva turns it to glucose, to sugar. Before you even swallow it, it turns to sugar, right? So when we have refined either sugar or grains, it's all sugar. It's all the same thing. You want to think of it the same way. So when you read a label, if it's a grain like wheat or rice or corn, if it doesn't say whole, stone ground, or sprouted, that means it's refined. So if it just says wheat flour, then in your brain, what do you think? You think sugar. Got it? Okay. High fructose corn syrup is the king of all refined sugars, okay, for a variety of reasons. But it's going to cause the highest insulin spike, and I'll tell you why in just a second.
Finish the question. I'm sorry, you said look for whole, refined, or what was the third one?
Whole, stone ground, or sprouted.
I'm stone.
And sprouted would be the best.
Thank you.
So sprouted would be like Ezekiel bread.
Oh, yeah.
If you've seen Ezekiel bread, when you sprout a grain, it's like bringing it to life. You know, it's like soaking beans, and they kind of come. So when they come to life, all these enzymes are activated. There's more nutrients available. They're easier to digest. So that's why sprouted is the best. And kind of at a higher level, if you're looking to like get really good with your nutrition, all grains and nuts and legumes, they would all be sprouted. Because they're better that way. Okay, so here's how it works. When you consume something that turns to sugar, it's going to break down into glucose in the bloodstream. And insulin is going to come in, because you can only have so much sugar in your blood at a time, okay? So it can either be utilized for energy, it could be stored in your muscles or your liver as glycogen. So glycogen is the stored form of sugar. Write that down. Glycogen is the stored form of sugar. Or it could be stored as fat. And remember, insulin is a fat storage hormone. So if you're insulin sensitive, so you're not insulin resistant, then what'll happen is relatively easily the insulin will bind to the glucose. It'll interact with a receptor on the outside of your cell. So this is a cell. And the brain of your cell is the cell membrane. So we think of like when I was in high school science class, I thought of the brain as the nucleus. You know, you guys remember any of this stuff? You get the nucleus and the endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria, right? So, but the brain is really on the cell membrane. That's where all the communication takes place, and the health of your cell is very dependent on the health of the cell membrane. The cell membrane is made of fat, right? So what happens is insulin binds to the receptor, it takes glucose in, and then the cell can either turn it into energy or then it's stored as fat. Well, when you do that over and over and over again, so if you're chronically elevating insulin, which means you're creating inflammation the whole time, what causes hormone resistance is that you have overstimulated the receptor, and so the cell looks like this instead, okay? So this cell is not able to interact with the insulin because the receptor sites have been kind of beaten down. So the end result, it starts out that you look like this, where your glucose and your insulin levels stay relatively low. But then when you become resistant, your insulin levels start having to go higher to create the same thing happening because of this. Oh shoot, I should have done that. I even knew that, like before, I was like, whatever you do, don't go back to that slide. That's a good stop check. Everybody with me so far?
Mhm.
All right. So, anyways, the insulin has to go higher. So do you see why that's a problem? Because we said high insulin causes all those bad things that we don't want to have happen, like inflammation and lowering your serotonin and all that stuff. So what happens is you have this chronic elevated insulin, which causes your body to be inflamed and to age faster than you're supposed to. So good eating is also very anti-aging. Keeping your insulin levels low keeps away accelerated aging and anything associated with the aging process. Okay. This is also the zone where you would be called hypoglycemic. So if you don't understand what that means, what might you think? My blood sugar is low, so I need more of it, right? And this is the zone where you feel like if you get hungry often, and where you crave sugar. All of these are signs that you have developed some hormone resistance. So you should be able to skip a meal and not have an issue with it, or fast and not have like a huge problem with it. If you do, or if you have a big meal, but unless you eat bread or unless you have dessert, you don't feel satisfied, then there's some hormone resistance going on. So we want to fix this process right here. And as long as you're hormone resistant, it also makes you weight loss resistant, which we're going to talk about why in just a second. Okay? The end result of it, this is what you would call a type 2 diabetic. Okay? So it's at the very end of the process. So if you've been told that you're borderline type 2 diabetic, you might think, I just started having a problem, right? Like I'm just starting to develop some diabetes issues, but really you're at the end of the thing. You see what I'm saying? Like there's been dysfunction, you've had hormone resistance, you've had too much inflammation for a long time. Like we gotta get serious, we gotta fix this thing. And then if you're all the way in the diabetes land, then like obviously we've gotta get really, really, really serious about it, okay? But the good news is you could fix all these things. So a lot of conditions, a lot of diseases that people think of as incurable or just manageable through medication, you could overcome, but not through medication. There's no pill that you could take that will fix this. You have to fix it through your diet, by getting your body to work the way that it's supposed to. Okay? Second thing, no, this is not necessarily about diet, but I'm going to show you why it's related to it. So this is where we get into some stress-related stuff for you, okay? Cortisol is one of the main stress hormones that you have that's released when you're stressed out. And it's secreted by your adrenal glands. Cortisol stimulates appetite. It's catabolic. That means that it encourages your body to break itself down, to eat into your muscle tissue. It increases fat storing and it suppresses the immune system. Now the reason why it does all of these things, for those of you who are stressed a lot, like my teachers in the room, when you think of a stress response, so like what your body's doing is, there's a couple things that happen, like when you're stressed out. Your blood flow is directed towards your extremities instead of to your organs. Energy is directed away from your immune system and away from your digestive system. Your blood pressure is raised. So there's all these physiological changes that happen when you get stressed out. And the reason why is because that's a very appropriate thing to do if you have to either fight or flight. So your sympathetic nervous system becomes dominant as a result of this stress hormone being released. And so what's supposed to happen is that after whatever life-threatening situation happens, your body comes back into its normal balance. So your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system come back to where they're supposed to be. The problem is when this happens while you're sitting at a desk, or talking on the phone, or your kids are screaming in your car. Maybe that's just me. So in other words, it's not happening where we have to, like it's mobilizing us to get physical, you know what I mean? But we're not physical, we're sitting there being stressed out. And so that's why this creates dysfunction in the body. Well, remember how if we stimulate insulin all the time, we become resistant to it? Remember that? Go like this? So when we overstimulate cortisol, then what we become is we become sympathetic dominant. We get like stuck in that mode, and our adrenal glands get fatigued, and you can't find your balance again. Okay, so what we have to look at is what are some of the ways that we can find our balance again, and how does this affect some of the other areas of health that we're looking at? The biggest one is sleep. So this is what should be happening. When you go to sleep, you should fall asleep within about 15 minutes of your head hitting the pillow. You should get 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep, so you don't wake up in the middle of the night. That's not happening, no?
No.
And you should wake up feeling rested without an alarm clock. Now, if all these things are not happening, then you're hormone resistant in regards to your sleep. Okay? So what's a hormone that's involved with sleep? Serotonin is one of them, yeah. Melatonin is another big one. Okay? Yeah, so your neurotransmitters are jacked up. You've got to get those things back into balance. So I'm going to show you some ways to do that. But this is one of the most common signs that either your diet's out of whack or that you've got a toxicity issue. So those are the two main things we want to look at to decrease inflammation. Can I talk about inflammation one more time?
Sure.
When it comes to your diet, and this is something that you want to write down. Bone broth? Very nice. There's two things that cause inflammation in your diet. What's one of them? Sugar. Thank you. Or anything that turns to sugar. The other one is bad fats. Man-made, altered fats, and we'll get into what those are in just a second. So you want to own that what I just told you, that sugar and bad fats cause inflammation. The third thing that causes inflammation, so upregulated systemic inflammation, is toxicity, exposure to toxins. Right? So if we want to decrease the inflammatory response, we want to address those three things. How chronic sleep deprivation contributes to weight loss resistance. One, it decreases your insulin sensitivity. You see how these things are kind of going together now? Which makes you store fat easier. It increases cortisol, especially during the afternoon and the evening, which makes you crave sugar. It lowers your thyroid function, which also causes you to gain weight. By the way, if you're cold all the time, if your hair falls out a lot, and if you have dry skin, those are the most common signs that you have a thyroid problem. It decreases your leptin levels. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but which increases your appetite. It decreases your glucose tolerance, which causes blood sugar issues. Okay, so if this last one is important. If B vitamins are depleted, you can't make your neurotransmitters needed to help you go to sleep and stay asleep. So here's one thing that is that's good to know. So when you're stressed out, especially if it's chronic, so if you like have a career or a life that's stressful, like we probably all do, then whenever you have that physiological response, so whenever you get stressed out, when your kid's screaming in the car, then it's not just how you feel, like stuff is happening physiologically in your body, things are changing, and it requires certain nutrients to complete the chemical reactions that make that happen, okay? So if that happens all the time, does it make sense that you would become depleted of those nutrients? Okay, so that's one of the things that causes you to get into what we call adrenal fatigue, if you've ever heard of that term. Adrenal fatigue is one of the reasons why you might not be able to sleep. Adrenal fatigue is one of the reasons why initially it results in you being ramped up all the time, but then as it spills over into like a worse situation, then you're just like wiped out. So adrenal fatigue then leads into chronic fatigue. So if that's you, then there's a good chance that you're depleted of certain B vitamins. So my suggestion on that one would be that you would take a B complex, or that you would investigate what foods are high in B vitamins. Usually if you just guess green leafy vegetables, you'll probably be right, for like anything. And then the other thing would be some kind of adrenal support. So there's certain herbs like ashwagandha and Siberian ginseng and things like this that are called adaptogenic herbs. That means that they help your body find its ability to adapt to like come back into balance. So the one that we have that I highly recommend is it's called adrenatone, but there's lots of different things that you could do. But it should have those kind of herbs in it. All right, let's talk about leptin. Now leptin is kind of like a cousin to insulin, but it has different effects. Leptin is a protein hormone with important effects on regulating body weight metabolism and reproductive function. It's manufactured in the fat cells, and the level of circulating leptin is directly proportional to the total amount of fat in the body. Leptin acts on receptors in the hypothalamus of the brain, where it results in the inhibition of food intake. T cells, where it enhances the production of Th1 cells, promoting inflammation. What is leptin? Leptin is a hormone that tells your brain to burn fat for energy. Therefore, it controls your metabolism, appetite, and energy. Leptin is also in charge of many other hormones and is therefore linked to many degenerative diseases such as heart disease, osteoporosis, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and once again, even premature aging. Is leptin why I can't lose weight despite how much I exercise? Yes. Here's a really, really important point. Your body can only burn two things for energy, sugar or fat. If your leptin is out of balance, you will be locked in a sugar-burning mode and not able to utilize your fat stores. You can exercise and diet daily, but the fat will not come off despite your best efforts. So leptin resistance causes weight loss resistance. If your brain can't hear leptin, the brain can't get the message to burn fat despite what you do, okay? Another kind of key thing that I want you to remember, so write this down, is if we think of like the three sort of food groups, we have protein, carbohydrates, and fats, right? Well, there's a fourth one that I want you to learn, and it's called ketones. So your brain can run off of two things. It could run off of glucose, or it could run off of ketones. And ketones are what happen when your body breaks down body fat to use for energy when you have run out of sugar and glycogen. Remember glycogen? What's glycogen? Stored sugar in our muscles and our liver. Okay? So when you run out of that, your body will go into what's called ketosis, and it'll break down body fat. And getting into ketosis is, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but it's one of the most anti-inflammatory things that you can do, as well as great for getting your body to burn body fat. And it has there's another term that I want you to learn, which is epigenetics. So write down epigenetics. Raise your hand if you've heard the term epigenetics. Raise your hand if you've never heard the term epigenetics. Okay. We are learning new things today. Isn't this fun? I think it's fun. Epigenetics means above the gene. So I'm about to give you something really empowering right now.
Above the genes?
Above the gene. It's literally epigenetic means above the gene. And so what that has to do with is that a lot of times we think of our genes as being kind of like set in stone, like it is what it is. But the reality is genes, and this is my easiest way to understand it, is genes can be turned on or off, and they can be expressed in different ways based on how your body is functioning, based on the level of inflammation in your body, based on how much stress you're under, based on whether or not you have the right nutrients to complete chemical reactions. So genes are not set in stone. Does that make sense? So you could have an obesity gene in your family, but it has to be turned on to make you obese. You could have a heart disease gene in your family, but it has to be turned on, usually by the way that you live your life. Okay? So what we want is we want positive gene expression. And the biggest things that affect positive gene expression are the kind of bacteria that you have in your gut, which also affect how much serotonin there is, how well your brain works, and how your immune system works. So the condition of your gut has a big effect on positive gene expression. And ketones have a huge effect on positive gene expression. And they're highly anti-inflammatory. That's why fasting has such a healing property on the body, because when you go without food for 3-4 days, you're getting into ketosis, okay? It's usually kind of painful to get there, but I'm going to show you some ways to make it non-painful, okay? So if you fast and it's like you've got brain fog and you're headachy and you just feel bad, you've got some hormone resistance. You should be able to dip into a fasting zone. You should be able to burn body fat for ketones as soon as you start fasting. And I'm going to tell you how a little bit later that you could actually do that. Okay? But the other thing that will turn on bad genes, guess what one of them is? Sugar, which causes inflammation. Okay, so inflammation was the answer. Remember, if you just say inflammation, you're probably right. So that's what. Once again, we want to decrease inflammation. We want to increase hormone sensitivity for those reasons. But so sugar, which causes inflammation, and also toxicity is another way to turn on bad genes, and stress is another way to turn on bad genes. Okay. So for instance, let me give you kind of a classic example that you've heard of something like this happening, but you maybe didn't understand why, and maybe it happened to you. So somebody will be going along with their life, and things seem to be going pretty good. They don't have a lot of health problems or anything like that. But then something happens, something stressful, and it could be either physically, chemically, or emotionally stressful. By the way, you want to remember those three stressors: physical, chemical, and emotional stress. They all affect the body in similar ways. So maybe they got into a car accident, or maybe they went through a divorce, or maybe they opened up a thermometer and they ate what was inside of it. So something physically, chemically, or emotionally stressful happened, and then all of a sudden everything went to crap. Like they started having chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia type symptoms. They stopped being able to sleep. Like something went out of whack and it just never got right again. Okay? So was it all the car accident? No, something was brewing. And so whatever that stressful event was, it tipped the bucket. It triggered the gene. So they were probably already loaded up with toxins, but what I say is the bucket hadn't overflowed yet. So if you think of your body as like a bucket, the bucket fills up, with all the stuff you're exposed to, but when it overflows, that's when a person gets sick. Does that make sense? Okay? So what you now know is that what happened is some gene was triggered, but something had been brewing over the whole time. So the way that you fix yourself, if that's you, is you have to look at all of those 5 factors. You have to use your diet to decrease inflammation and increase hormone sensitivity. You got to fix your gut. You got to detoxify. You got to fix your spine. That's one of the reasons why a car accident is one of the most common reasons why that happens, is because the car accident screws up the spine. It creates this. Now the spine has constant physical stress on the nerve system. We'll talk more about this later. But you see, it's like this big picture. Everybody with me? And the reason why it's so hard to get better from these what I call new millennium diseases, like all these problems that have popped up as a result of the sheer mass of toxins and chemicals that we're exposed to, and the stress of our lives and all the distraction, is because you have to put all of those pieces together to truly get well. And most people don't know how to do that. So I'm hoping to give you some of those pieces today so you'll be able to apply them. We're going to skip some of this leptin stuff. I will answer these questions though. Why do I have uncontrollable cravings? If you're either a sugar burner or a fat burner, this part's really important. If you're either a sugar burner or a fat burner, if you're in sugar burning mode, your body can actually burn 2 things as sugar. It can either burn sugar that you eat or that you've stored, or it can convert protein to sugar. Okay, so it could either convert it's called gluconeogenesis. Does anybody remember that? No? All right. Sometimes I forget what was in high school and what was in Chiro school, you know what I mean? So some of you have had it, some of you haven't. Anyway, there's a process called gluconeogenesis, which I still hear in an Indian accent because my biochem teacher was Indian. Gluconeogenesis? But anyways, so it's where your body breaks down protein to turn it into sugar to be used as sugar. So that can either happen from what you would protein that you would eat, or it could break down your own muscle. Remember how we said cortisol is catabolic? So we want things that are anabolic. We want to build lean muscle. So somebody who's stuck in a sugar burning mode, the tendency is as they age, they lose their muscle mass, because from time to time when they don't have sugar, You burn into your own muscle. So that's why your body gives you those cravings, because it doesn't want to do that. Does that make sense? So and that's also why if we're trying to fix this hormone resistance problem, like if we want to get the switch flipped back into fat burning, we have to watch how much protein we take in, because if we're doing a high protein diet trying to change insulin resistance, even if you're doing no sugar, you can stay in sugar burning mode because you're providing enough protein to be burned as sugar. Does that make sense?
How do you block that receptor? What stop, like what are you changing in the body to stop burning muscle?
You get back into where you can burn fat.
And the body will automatically, just getting into burning the fat, like it's gonna burn sugar and then you're gonna burn the fat. I mean, burn the muscle. You're gonna lose muscle instead of fat.
Correct.
How long does that transformation take?
It depends on how you do it. And it depends on the person, and it depends on what's causing it. It depends on a lot of things. So if it's strictly, this is a really good question. If it's strictly a insulin resistance, hormone resistance problem just from diet, okay, then all you have to do to fix it is change the diet. Okay, so typically, and it depends on how deep you want to go. So if you get yourself into, if you fast, if you do a 4 or 5 day fast on bone broth or water, or there's different things that you can do, then you'll get yourself into a fat burning mode within that time frame. Another thing to very rapidly do it is to, okay, I'll go ahead and talk about this now, is to consume exogenous ketones. So we're going to choose our adventure this way for just a second. So, all right, so you remember how I said when you get into a fat burning mode, when you burn fat and break it down so that your brain can use it for energy, you're breaking it, you get into what's called ketosis. Which is, if you've heard of ketoacidosis and you think of that as like a bad thing, you're correct, that's a bad thing. That's what can happen to like a diabetic or something, okay? Ketosis is an extremely healthy state. Okay, and there are certain things that, that your body breaks down. There's different substances that are ketones. Well, this is relatively new science, but you can consume what are called exogenous ketones. That exo means outside of you. So you take something that's a ketone and you consume it. And when you do that, something cool happens. You get a lot of the same effects as being in ketosis, and it gets you into ketosis really fast, okay? So when you do a fast, the reason why your brain feels the way that it does is because you're starving it, okay? Like it doesn't have any glucose, and that's like why you feel the way that you feel. And so when you stop feeling that way, that's when you know you've gone into fat burning mode, okay? That's one way to be able to tell. One way to be able to tell you're in fat burning mode is that when you're in ketosis, your energy is it's not just higher, but it's very sustainable. So, and for everything, for your daily life, for your performance in athletics, anything you could think of, like having ketones available is extremely valuable for energy. Your brain is much clearer. You sleep better. Your inflammation levels go down fast. Like a friend of mine, Kyle, that I used to play drums with, he's younger than me, but he's kind of a burly guy, and he developed blood pressure issues that he just couldn't get in check. He did a 4 or a 5 day water fast. His blood pressure went down right away. Like in 5 days, he fixed it. And people sleep better, almost right away getting into ketosis. So anyways, when you consume an exogenous ketone, it has a lot of the same effects, and you skip the whole suffering phase. All right? So there's different ways that you can do it. Like where I learned about this, and the main ones are either ketone salts or ketone esters. Ketone esters are more powerful, but evidently they taste like really, really gross. But they're using ketone esters with special ops, like military. And one of the reasons why they're using them is that like a Navy SEAL, they'll use these rebreathers which don't produce any bubbles. So if you're trying to sneak up on somebody, it's beneficial not to have bubbles coming up. But the problem is it's pure oxygen, and in a period of time, it'll actually cause a seizure. So anyways, they were trying all these different things to keep them from having seizures, and they were doing a medication route for a while. But what they found is that when they put them on ketone esters, it worked better than all the medications. It's anti-seizure. And a ketogenic diet, one thing we've known for years and years, it's one of the only therapeutic things that works on a drug-resistant seizure disorder. Okay? Because it's feeding the brain what it needs. So anyways, there's a few different things you could do. This is a 10-day reset where you take ketone salts combined with MCT oil. Write that down. Coconut oil, MCT oil is the other thing. In addition to exogenous ketones, like beta-hydroxybutyrate is the most common one you'll see, like if you were to buy it. But MCT oil, medium-chain triglycerides, which are in coconut oil, or you could just get just the straight MCT, is the other thing that will push you into ketosis real fast. So anyways, this is a 10-day reset that provides exogenous ketones plus like a snack and then a shake. But you don't have to do something like this, but this just makes it easy. So a couple little tricks to kind of push yourself into a ketogenic mode. One is that I like to, in the morning, I'm going to give you my coffee recipe. So I got this cheap little espresso maker. So I'll make a thing of espresso, and then I'll take about a tablespoon of coconut oil, and I'll put it in. I'll put it in with the espresso, and I'll add a little bit of salt to it, and some raw cocoa powder, and a couple of stevia drops, and it's delicious. It tastes like a salted mocha. It's really awesome. And so you get that
Give me that ingredients again.
Coffee, coconut oil, cocoa powder, stevia. Yeah, if you don't drink coffee, you're out of luck.
That's why I like
You
that.
got to figure out your own
Put it
way.
in hot chocolate?
It's too.
You could put it in hot. Well, you could put it in hot chocolate, but then you got all the sugar in there, so you'd have to. All right. You could make your own hot chocolate, so it doesn't have to be coffee. I guess you could do it in milk or something.
Could you do it in green tea?
You could do it in green tea. Yeah.
Can you use?
I like how you guys are using your prefrontal cortex. You're thinking creatively.
Can you use Truvia instead of stevia?
The Truvia has, I can't remember what, but it's got some stuff in it that's no good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I like Sweet Leaf is the brand, and they make drops, and they're really good, and they have vanilla flavored, and they're different flavors, or you could just get the straight regular one. But I really like those. So, but anyways, I like to do what's called an intermittent fast, where the last meal that I'll have will be dinner, and then I don't eat breakfast. I'll do like that coffee. I'll do that to kind of kick and this is when I'm trying to be in ketosis. Okay, I'm not always like this, but and then I'll do that what's called a bulletproof coffee. You could also add a tablespoon of butter and make it bulletproof. If you've ever heard of bulletproof coffee, it's coconut oil and it's butter. But anyways, high fat gets you into it faster. Okay? So anyways, we did that adventure. Back to the original question. The other thing, if toxicity, however, is the thing that's causing you to be stuck in a sugar burning mode, then unless you fix that, diet alone won't fix it. So if you change your diet, if you're doing like higher fat, moderate carbohydrate, moderate protein, you're not doing any refined carbohydrates, you're not doing any grains. We'll talk about like kind of this, there's a specific type of diet you want to do to reestablish hormone sensitivity when it comes to this. If you're doing that and nothing's happening, then there's something else that's creating hormone resistance, and it's probably a toxicity problem, which we're going to talk about later. All right? Any questions on that? No? All right. What causes leptin to go out of balance? And this is what we just talked about. Two things: standard North American diet and toxins. Toxins destroy the receptors to the hormone in your brain, and now your brain can't hear leptin's message to burn fat. So toxins, the reason why toxins will cause inflammation and weight loss resistance is because toxins will they like fatty places. And fatty places are the cell membranes. Remember how important the cell membranes are? It's the brain of the cell, it's where all the communication happens. So the fattiest places are the cell membranes of your nerve cells and your fat cells. And when a neurotoxin in particular binds to the cell membrane of your fat cells, it causes your fat cells to produce something called pro-inflammatory cytokines. So write down cytokines. There's another, fancy word that I want you to know.
Spell that.
Cytokines. C-Y. Here, I'll write it. I help you out.
K-I-N-S. Works for me.
I couldn't remember if it was a K or a C. It's a K. That's a K right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got it.
Cytokines. All right, so recently, I lost, there it is. Being the nice guy that I am, I was petting a neighborhood cat that tends to come by the house. It's not our cat, but our kids have named it Cookie, and they'll pick up Cookie, and so I'm sitting on the front porch, and Cookie jumps up, and I'm petting Cookie for like a good 10 minutes. Cookie is really getting into it. And then all of a sudden, Cookie turns on me and bites me on the hand, like not like a nibble, like teeth sunk all the way in, bit me in the hand. And it like, I should have put a picture in the PowerPoint. It was like bleeding, it was gross. So I go inside and I immediately put some purification oil on it. But I don't know if you've heard this, but a cat bite can be like a bad thing. Like people can end up in the emergency room and all this stuff from cat bite. So by the next day, my cat bite was like red, it was red and swollen and it hurt real bad. And then a couple days into it, there was like a red streak going up my arm, which they say is a bad sign. So that redness, what causes that redness?
Inflammation.
Very good, okay? So what's happening is I had a lot of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So inflammation is pain. There's some acronym like RUBAR or something like that. But it's like pain, redness, swelling, heat. Yes, thank you. So all of these things are related to inflammation, and so that happened at a localized place as my immune system trying to fight off this cat thing. And by the way, I did not end up in the emergency room. We were able to defeat it with no antibiotics. We used only essential oil. So Rachel will tell you. Rachel's going to talk about essential oils a little bit later, but she'll tell you how we did that. But anyways, and I was just about to, I haven't taken an antibiotic in at least 20 years, and so I'm like, I am not going to do it, but I was just about to because my whole arm was hurting and my fingers were going numb and I was starting to feel a little weird in my head. Like I was like, all right, it's time, like it's time to be humble about this situation. But I started the shift feeling that way, and she had given me some I took some essential oils internally. By the end of the shift, the redness was gone, my brain was clear, and it was better. So I mean, it worked.
Also, though, I think your immune system was also very high, too.
Absolutely. You better believe my
Okay,
immune
'cause
system's
if someone's
high.
immune system was down, that would have had the same effect.
Right, yeah. I will agree with you on that. So anyways, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so this is localized inflammation, okay? Localized inflammation, so pro-inflammatory cytokines. But when you got a toxicity problem, your fat cells produce pro-inflammatory cytokines all the time. So you have upregulated systemic-wide inflammation. And inflammation affects the cell membrane, which causes hormone resistance all by itself. And then the other thing that it causes your fat cells to do is to release leptin. And so if you're always releasing leptin, it eventually causes leptin resistance. Do you see where all this is going, how the toxicity plays into this whole thing? So that's why somebody who's toxic will usually have been diagnosed with some kind of inflammatory disorder. So, so if you're looking at like an autoimmune type disorder, like rheumatoid arthritis, what are we looking at? We're looking at gut dysfunction because the gut is related to immune system dysfunction, and we're looking at upregulated inflammatory response. Any kind of inflammatory bowel disorder, any kind of chronic pain, especially like migrating joint pain stuff. These are all typically toxicity-related problems. That person needs to do a detox. So, and we have questionnaires if you want to kind of like grade yourself on am I toxic and how bad? And what type of toxin does it look like it is? I'm going to show you how to do this questionnaire, and you could kind of find out for yourself. All right. Yeah, so we already said this. 2 things: leptin resistance and or toxicity would cause your brain not to be able to hear leptin. And it's the same thing, except at the cell membrane, we're actually talking about at the hypothalamus, and you develop a leptin-resistant hypothalamus. And the way that you heal it is by stop overstimulating the receptors. You have to get the leptin levels down, so that's either through fixing your diet or fixing the toxicity problem that's causing it. Okay, why your diet creates disease. So one area, so we can talk about like chemicals and personal care products and stuff like this, but one of the best ways to make yourself toxic is by eating it through your diet. So the standard American diet is extremely toxic. Here's the kind of what I think of are the primary culprits. One is hydrogenated oils or any kind of bad fat, artificial sweeteners, genetically modified foods. Remember how we talked about how important the gut is? One of the best ways to screw up your gut is to consume genetically modified foods. There are one of the things that they make in GMOs is they make the plant produce a gene that breaks down the digestive tract of the insect that tries to eat it. Okay, and so does that kind of like oh, maybe it might do something to my gut too? Well, it does. Food additives and medications. When I say medications, we're not just talking about what you take, but the vast majority of medications are toxic. But what we're talking about is that you could be eating it by eating medicated animal products too. All right. So when you talk about, I won't talk about that yet. Let's talk about bad fats first.